Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience this morning. I do apologise for the technical issues that we've had. Chairman, I can confirm we are now recording live on YouTube.
Thanks, Teresa, and welcome everybody to the January 2021 meeting of the Breckland Area Museums Committee. This is being live streamed, and I would ask people to use the chat box if they wish to speak. Thank you. So if we go to the agenda, the first item is to confirm the minutes of the 12th of October. That's pages 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, and that's it, page 9. Written. Is everybody in favour of those, accepting those minutes? Good, thank you. So the next item is apologies for absence. Ruth.
Thank you, Chairman. I've received apologies from Councillor Harvey, Councillor Richmond and John Ward.
Thank you. Any others? Okay. I have no chairman's announcements and no urgent business. I was going to deal with the repairs next to the Ancient House Museum under urgent business, but I think Oliver's report covers that thoroughly. So any declarations of interest, please? None. So we move on to the Ancient House Museum report. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I think if Robin Hanley is with us, he was going to deal with the first section regarding the COVID closures of the museums.
Okay.
That's okay.
Thank you, Oliver. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just to give members a very quick update on where Norfolk Museum Service is generally in regard to COVID closures, and obviously that has a direct impact on Ancient House. And when I finish this introduction, Oliver will then give an update on the measures being taken to recover activity at the Ancient House Museum. But as you'll see from the report from page 10 of the agenda pack, Norfolk Museum Service sites have been closed from the beginning of the original lockdown on the 19th of March. And since that time, in line with government guidance and legal restrictions, we have, where possible, sought to either reopen sites to the public or prepare them for reopening for other activity, including working with pre-booked groups of schools and young people. As I'm sure members are aware, it's been a changing situation. Back in the summer, we reopened successfully our 3 largest sites, that is Crescent Hall, Time and Tide and Norwich Castle. And then during October, we reopened Lynn Museum to the public. And following the introduction of the second lockdown, obviously those sites closed. And then when Norfolk was moved into Tier 2, sites were able to reopen. Once we got to the position as we approached Christmas that we were moving into another national lockdown, obviously sites closed once again. And just to make members aware that if we are in either Tier 3 or Tier 4, according to current restrictions, museums cannot reopen to the public. So we've had a whole series of openings and reclosures, in common with lots of colleagues around the sector. But just to reassure members that staff have been working really hard to reopen sites where that has been possible. Clearly, the majority of our staff remain working from home. when sites are closed to the public, we maintain regular programs of site checks and collections checks to ensure that the buildings remain sound and that collections remain in good condition. So that program of site and collections checks was initiated at the beginning of the very first lockdown and has continued throughout, and applies to sites whether they're open to the public or not. So that ongoing sort of safeguarding of our buildings and premises and collections has been taking place. As mentioned in the report under section 1.2, in common with lots of colleagues in local government, Norfolk Museum Service staff have also been helping with wider COVID response work, whether that's around calls to vulnerable people, helping with food distribution, supporting colleagues in trading standards and the registrar's service. And we are also currently looking at NMS staff potentially helping the NHS. So as you would expect, museum service staff have been very sort of positive about supporting some of that wider working wherever possible. As detailed in the report, museum service staff have also been very creative around providing different ways to engage with existing and new audience, particularly through digital activity. And you'll hear quite a bit about that during both of the reports presented today for Ancient House and Crescent Hall. And I'd certainly like to sort of put on record my thanks to the staff teams across NMS, including those in Breckland, who have been really creative and imaginative around finding new ways to use their collections and resources in different ways. And that's been one of the success stories, I think, of the situation in which we've found ourselves. Throughout this period of site reopenings and closures, we have obviously been following strict government guidance, as referenced in item 1.5. We've also been drawing on best practice through the National Museum Directors Council, who basically provide the framework for the safe reopening of museum sites. We've also been liaising with colleagues in the English Civic Museums Network, again, to share experience and share best practice. Wherever we have reopened sites, we've obviously ensured that we've followed really strict COVID secure procedures. We've worked really closely with colleagues in the County Council's health, safety and wellbeing team, who've supported us with the undertaking of really detailed risk assessments and the creation of safe systems work. And again, I'd like to say an enormous thank you to the operational teams, including Andrew and Oliver, for all the hard work around that necessary documentation. We've obviously worked very closely with our staff teams as well to ensure that they feel confident at the point at which we're asking them to come back to site and work in a COVID secure way. And when we have reopened sites, we've ensured that the visitor numbers have been very carefully managed. So as I'm sure you're aware, all visits to museum sites have been pre-booked using time tickets, using the Art Tickets website. And that has enabled us to really closely control numbers of visitors coming in.
That Art Tickets website, was that
so that was just introduction as to all the work across the. Sorry, Chairman.
Sorry, the Art Tickets website, was that something we discovered in the process of opening up, or was that something we'd used before?
It was something we'd used before. We'd used it for pre-booked events. So, for example, the family Christmas events at Crescent Hall, those had all been pre-booked using Art Tickets. So across the service, we had used Art Tickets previously, but never to this extent. So it's really been very helpful during lockdown to be able to use Art Tickets, and that has really proved pretty resilient, actually. And that's something we'll certainly continue to do as we begin to plan for the next phase of reopening. And as and on that subject, clearly we don't yet know the point at which when museums will reopen. We don't know the level of restriction that will apply at that time, but staff teams across the service are already beginning to do that planning to ensure that when we can reopen sites, we will do so as swiftly as possible. I'm happy to take any other questions, Chairman, or pass over to Oliver to give a bit of information about the work that's been going on at the Ancient House in terms of COVID recovery planning.
I think Mark Kittle-Morris has a question.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Robin. Thank you for that. I'm just wondering, you've done a lot of digital presentations and virtual tours, I suppose. Is there anything that you've done because of COVID that you're going to carry on doing when we get back to, I'll put normal in inverted commas, but back to normal? Is there anything you're going to carry on doing which will give that extra edge? And have you got the capacity to carry on doing that? I know everybody's moved across into that sort of sphere, but if they move back into their day jobs when we go back to normal, will you have the capacity to do that?
Yeah, I think one of the, I mean, we're all looking for positives out of this terrible situation, aren't we? And actually, one of the positives, I think, for the museum service is the fact we do now have a significant number of our staff who are much more confident and capable around developing digital resources. So I think that will benefit us and our sort of users in the long term. So I guess a good example of that would be the work that our schools teams have been doing. So the learning teams obviously were looking very quickly at how they could continue to sort of support schools. So that involved creating digital resources, including development of filmed resources, but also things like live streaming, where schools in the classroom could be engaging with a costume character live in a museum setting. And I think that sort of more blended approach to using digital and face-to-face is something that our learning teams are certainly looking to continue longer term. So it might be, for example, that as part of a sort of broader schools offer, as well as the visit to the site, which we know schools really value and which is so important, there will also be, I think, a broader digital offer to enable the schools to sort of prepare for that visit and also to do follow-up work. And some of that may involve film resources, some of that may involve live streaming. So I think that's a really good example of some of the new approaches and skills that the teams have developed during the lockdown period will be continued. But I'm certainly very aware that we now have a significant number of colleagues across NMS who are much more confident about working with digital and have the skills and the kit to do that work. So we have, as a service, invested in some of those higher end cameras that enable people to do sort of filming at the quality that we need. And we've undertaken quite a bit of training. So I think there will be a lot of a higher level of activity in digital that sort of enhances that more face-to-face delivery we'd be more familiar with. So I think that is one of the silver linings that's come out of this pretty awful situation.
Thank you for that, Robin. Any other questions for Robin? Okay, we go over to Oliver for the rest of the Ancient House report then. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just to round off the first section about the COVID closures, Ancient House, Norfolk Museum Service has 10 museums around the county, and they're examples of reuse of historic buildings. We don't have any purpose-built museums in the Norfolk Museum Service. Ancient House in Setford is reuse, as it says on the tin, of an old building in the town, 500-year-old Tudor house and originally shop. And its layout means that it's harder than some of the other museums to safely reopen to the public in terms of social distancing and the sort of one-way route around the building and so on. We did work very hard in the autumn on opportunities for schools to come back to the museum, and also our after-school teenage group. And we were hopeful that we were going to be able to have people back in the museum in December in that way. And the work continues in terms of making museums safe for visitors. So one aspect, for example, is covering over temporarily some of the touch exhibits in the museum. We've got a model of the ancient house itself, which encourages people to touch touch the side of the model, and that's something that we've had to put a sort of sticker over. So it's just an example of how we're working to make the museum safe during the pandemic. Another example that we will need to do, we're planning towards, is the interactive unit, which is part of the changing displays room where we have temporary exhibitions. We're thinking for our exhibitions program, we're going to need, at least for 2021, to remove and store that interactive unit. And the sort of the positive spin that we want to try and do for these measures is, that might give us space for other things that might be possible in that room. As I mentioned in 1.8, although we'd planned the recovery for schools and teenage groups for December, just before Christmas, we were slightly stymied by the work at the former King's Head pub next door. And just to mention, I do outline in the report and include the photographs for members to see if you've not been to Setford lately, or this part of Setford. The sort of the extent of the shoring up of the King's Head that was necessary, and the road closure that took place on White Hart Street. I suppose the key thing is to say that there have been ongoing discussions between our Norse buildings services people who help us look after the ancient house, and the equivalents in Breckland. I mentioned in the report here that the ancient house was given to the town by Prince Frederick Duleep Singh in the 1920s as a charity. The then Borough Council of Setford was the sole trustee of that charity. And then with local government reorganisation, that trusteeship was passed to Breckland Council. So Breckland Council are in effect owner of Ancient House and have an interest, with the Norfolk Museum Service operating and maintaining the building. Happy to take any questions there might be regarding that.
Yeah, I think one of the things Breckland does as owner is insure the building, I believe, but probably not the contents.
Yes, that's right. The issue of insurance is something that's being looked at the moment.
Okay. Any other questions for Oliver, please? None. So do you want to carry on there, Oliver? Or?
Yes, I'll carry on with item 3 relating to exhibitions and associated events. The museum in the temporary exhibition space I mentioned has a selection of studio ceramics, and one of the jobs we'll need to do to get the museum ready is to pack up that exhibition and return it to Norwich, where it's stored. And also a selection is planned to go to the Stories of Lynn exhibition at the Town Hall in King's Lynn. This would be in preparation for the Setford Treasure exhibition coming to the Ancient House. This would be a loan of a selection of items from the late Roman hoard of gold jewellery and silver spoons, inscribed silver spoons, which are very interesting and tell us a lot about Roman life and Roman religion in the late Roman period. And the British Museum, we're in touch with the British Museum, and the plan is for the exhibition to run from the 27th of March through till the 4th of December. Obviously, it's sort of pandemic providing, so we'll have to see how the next weeks and months progress. But we are working with the staff at the British Museum on that score.
Very good.
And then just finally to say in the exhibitions bit, we are working with the Brex River and Fen Edge project, and our focus is on Vikings. And just to say, we're wanting to work in partnership with Rick Hoggett, archaeologist, on this. I showed the link if you're interested in finding out a bit more about the Vikings and river raiders in the Brex here. But also, one of the concepts is to have a community curator input to the choice of objects in the exhibition. And on Friday, working with Sammy and Melissa Hawker, we worked with the teenagers, and they are helping us with the choice of objects that we are going to ask the British Museum if we might be able to borrow. And very exciting sort of conversation about what might be possible for on that score. I think that brings me to an end of that section, section 3.
Sorry, I've just lost the agenda on my laptop, so
would you like me to carry on to the next section?
yeah, yes, carry on. I'm nearly back there. Right, I'm back. Okay.
Thank you. So section 4 is just to say, of course, we haven't been able to do the learning work that we normally do in person. But moving on to section 5, as Robin has mentioned and Mark alluded to, we've been doing a lot of work on the digital front. Social media remains important, and I think Andrew, at the end of his section, reporting on the Crescent Hall Museum, will pass over information on the sort of the latest numbers for the social media delivery and digital delivery that we've been doing.
It's certainly been fun following some of your Twitter trails, should we say, and engaging with those where possible.
Thank you. Yes, yes, it's much appreciated, Robert. Thank you. And yes, we've got the links. If any of you are sort of Twitter or Facebook people, then do follow us and support us. Our work on social media would be much appreciated. Just to touch on Teenage History Club, I mentioned with the choice of the Vikings objects for requesting from the British Museum, and Melissa has been brilliant, of course, keeping the teenagers going through this difficult time. Not all of them have been able to cope with the Zoom meetings, but we had 5 of the teenagers on Friday, and you know, it's been great to maintain that link, because the Teenage History Club has been a great sort of asset, if you like, for Ancient House, and they've appreciated coming to the museum and learning about history and contributing to the work of the museum. So it's been really good that we've been able to keep that going. Then item 6, to pick out the Friends of the Museum. We're planning to do a Zoom, it's that word Zoom again, Zoom AGM with the Friends. I think on Wednesday evening is the plan.
Yeah, one of the things I do is audit their accounts, and I've got to deal with them signing those off later today, but these all appear to be in order. On that subject, they still hold the funds that were collected on their behalf for the David Osborne photo collection. They're waiting an invoice from Norfolk Museums, I believe, to hand that over, but perhaps you can clarify that at the AGM.
Yes, I think that's all in hand. So they should have got the invoice by now, I think.
Okay, well, I spoke to her last week. She hadn't.
Oh.
Because I was going to add because one of the funders had asked for a copy of the accounts to show that the money had been spent, and of course it's still in a reserve in the accounts. So if we could just follow up on that too.
Okay, I'll look into that. Thank you.
Because I said I would communicate directly with the funders on that particular issue.
Excellent, thank you. I'll look into that. At item 6.4, I mentioned about
I wonder whether the museum service has got the new treasurer's details. That might be an issue, perhaps.
Good, that's a good point. I'll check on that.
Okay.
So we come to item 6.4 in the report, which is the Teaching Museum Trainee Scheme. And I mentioned, I noticed in the minutes from last time that Sammy, I referred to Sammy as excellent, and I continue to think Sammy is excellent. And on that score, I think it's probably good if we can pass over to Sammy to do an update on his work and his experience during this strange time.
Welcome, Sammy, and we look forward to your report.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for letting me join today, and thanks for that lovely introduction, Oliver. So I just wanted to give a fairly quick overview of my experience so far as this year's cohort as the curatorial trainee for the Western area. So having started this placement near the beginning of the pandemic, as you can imagine, the vast majority of the work's been done remotely. In my case, that's in Ely. I was worried what this would mean for my traineeship, whether I was able to engage as much as I hoped, or whether it would actually run at all. However, these worries were soon dashed. I realised just how supportive all my colleagues at Ancient House and Norfolk Museum Service were in my museum career development, and how quickly everybody collectively made this transition to this digital online working. So, as you can imagine, one of the main issues working remotely as a museum is not being able to interact with all the enthusiastic museum visitors. We've able to put on a really wide offer of digital events, and I've been able to meet a great number of people in the local community and actually people from all around the world who have been really eager to hear about Ancient House Museum, and this is all thanks to the wonders of modern day technology. So just to name some of these talks that I've been able to help work on, we've had a glimpse of Thetford's Black History, which we ran back in October during Norfolk's Black History Month. This was celebrating the history of local stories of ethnic minorities, such as the Maharaja Duleep Singh and his family, and Dr. Minns, Britain's first Black mayor. We've also had events that have been specifically to engage our young audience more, such as How to Dig Up a T-Rex, where we worked with our natural history curator, Dr. David Waterhouse. More recently, I've been working on a series of events called Quiz a Character. So this has been with Ancient House, Lim Museum and Crescent Hall Farm and Workhouse. We've received incredible amount of interest on these, and we've had hundreds of questions being asked to washerwomen, Victorian schoolmasters and Roman women. And these are just to name a few. We've got many more to come still. I've also been able to join Melissa Hawker, our learning officer, in some school deliveries online. So recently we've live streamed to 2 primary schools at once, where we worked with freelancers and that was in their learning curriculum of Anglo-Saxons and Vikings. As mentioned by Robin and Oliver, we've had a large social media output during the pandemic, and this has been a really good way to engage with our audience by sharing our amazing collection. We've had a lot of projects on social media where museums have actually banded together nationally and internationally, such as Ask a Curator, Museum 30 and Museum Buddy. And we've been able to promote and discuss the roles of museums in modern day and share our collection by linking events and objects to daily themes. I've gotten to know a lot more about Thetford's rich history through some of the research projects that I've done and shared on social media, such as Ancient House's 100 Objects project. I've learned and written about our local unique industries, such as pulpware, the first archaeological twinning site between Grimes Graves and Hoshikuso obsidian mines in Japan, and of course gotten to know the local historical names such as Boudicca and Thomas Paine. We also had a 4-hour live Twitch stream where we worked with a gamer and streamer to show a computer game from the Assassin's Creed franchise featuring the last Maharaja Duleep Singh. And this was really good actually, because we're able to engage with an audience who didn't actually have prior knowledge of Ancient House, but they expressed just how keen they were to visit once the conditions allow. Of course, all these events that we've had have had lots of crucial help from local organisations. So I've worked with Leaping Hare, who have been really helpful in the promotion of these events, as well as some of the local papers, such as About Thetford and Brandon Times and Iceni magazine, for who I've written many press releases. I should also mention that this week we'll be delivering an event working with Thetford Town of Sanctuary and Aid Matters in Thetford to host Creating Sanctuary event. And I'm really, really proud to be involved with this. So this will be for local groups and organisations to learn how they can do more to provide a safe and welcoming place for asylum seekers and refugees. And we'll be looking at some of the fantastic work that's already been done in the area. I just wanted to end on the work that we've been doing, looking at the future of Ancient House Museum. So Oliver's mentioned some of these planning of exhibitions, such as the Thetford Treasure and the River Heritage, where initially we'll be looking at some of the Viking history in the Brecks. So this has been really good because, as Oliver's mentioned, this allowed me to work with our fantastic Teenage History Club through some of the object selection and discussing their wonderful ideas and hearing what they have to say of what they would like to see in our museum space. So I think that's all from me. So I'm happy if there's any questions, or if not, I'm happy to pass on to Oliver.
Okay, Terry, Jeremy would like to make a comment.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you really to Sammy, because he probably doesn't realise that in addition to being a counsellor, I actually help run the About Thetford magazine, which is why I'm in the office this morning, because it's print deadline day and I'm somewhat short-staffed because, as some of you know, Karen's been quite unwell. But I suspect, Sammy, it was probably you that sent me an awful lot of the content, and it was always very well written. And I was going to comment on the activities that you have planned for February, which I always read them and I always wish I had children, frankly, because I would love to take more advantage of some of the stuff that you have going on. But I was going to ask how you, and this might be for yourself or it might be for Oliver, but how you merge your activities and your content with the school curriculum, because they always look really interesting to me, but obviously I don't have children, so I don't know how useful they are in terms of the curriculum. So it'd be really useful to know how you pick out the sort of aspects of history and whatnot and merge it with what goes on in actual school. So that might be quite interesting to know. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind. That's probably something I think our learning officer, Melissa Hawker, would be able to answer in greater detail than I could. But I don't know if Oliver is able to contribute on that at all.
Yes, thank you, Terry. It's a very good question, and I would say that one of the key things is the dynamic relationship between our learning officer and the learning team and the teaching staff in the schools. And I think what we're always keen to do is make our response to the schools in terms of learning delivery as tailored as it can be. So it's that sort of initial conversation with the teacher, working out what their learning needs are of the children, and seeing how we can tailor that to the resources and knowledge that we have. So I think I would say it's a dynamic relationship between the museum service and the school. And the teaching staff is key to this. I don't know, Robin, if you had any thoughts or comments on learning delivery to schools and
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, Oliver. So as Oliver said, our learning teams across the service, and Melissa, and the Crescent Hall team, fantastic examples of that. One of their real strengths is the fact that they do sort of work really closely with teachers, and the program that we offer is in a case of sort of ongoing review, because the school's requirements do change and the needs of the curriculum do change. So, the key to providing a relevant program is that ongoing dialogue. So, over any period of time that the school's program will evolve, and also that sort of colours as well, I think, our approach to a number of the sort of family activities. So in many cases, those will be complementing work that we're doing around the curriculum, albeit in a more informal way. So I think the work of the schools team is obviously critical around ensuring that the schools offer is relevant, and that dialogue, as Oliver described, with local teachers, really important. But also looking at how, where appropriate, some of that can then inform the holiday programs as well. And I think it's, where we've got museums like Ancient House that are, very much relying on those sort of local schools, that sort of one-to-one relationship with the teachers and staff like Melissa is absolutely critical. And if we take the eye off the ball with that, very quickly we can start to see, a reduction in numbers of schools using us. So it involves a lot of ongoing work and an ongoing dialogue to make sure the program stays relevant to the curriculum and relevant to the teachers, because we know that, even without COVID, teachers are under huge pressure, and justifying trips out is always difficult. So we need to ensure that when schools are visiting our sites or engaging with our programs, they can be very clear about, the direct relevance and to their work, and that, makes half of the case, if you like, for them undertaking those visits. So really important, and something we need to keep on doing.
Thank you, Robin, Oliver, and thank you very much, Sammy, for your presentation. Just a point of information that the Museum Trainee Scheme is funded by Arts Council England, and the funders have agreed that this year's trainees employment extends to 18 months. So with a bit of luck over the summer, you will actually get some non-digital engagement. Right. Does that conclude Ancient House, Oliver?
I think so, yes. Thank you, Robert. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So we move on to Crescent Hall.
Thank you, Chairman. Good to see everybody this morning. I just wanted to make a quick note for you all that I'm having some internet connectivity issues this morning. We've got homeschooling going on upstairs. So if I do freeze or you lose me, hopefully it will be temporarily. So just to follow on from the previous reporting, I'd just like to continue to update you on the Crescent Hall Farm Workhouse report. So just touching very briefly on point 1, which Robin has covered in the initial report, and I'm sort of picking up at about 1.7 really around the reopening of Crescent Hall following the COVID secure implementation of routes and secure safe ways of working. So we also reduced touch points at Crescent Hall as well, as Oliver has mentioned for Ancient House, and covered those over where appropriate. One of the other things we did introduce as well for the Crescent Hall visitors were some takeaway activities. So I think we've talked a bit about blended activities, and this was another way for us to achieve that. So there were self-led and self-contained takeaway activity packs introduced for our families and younger visitors to enjoy whilst they were on site. Under 1.8, I also wanted just to expand slightly on the art ticket situation. So Robin's mentioned how we've been using that across all of the sites to provide the online booking platform for us to get them pre-booked tickets set up. And to accommodate the social distancing requirements for each site, we've had to set up a number of visitors per 15-minute slot, so for a 15-minute booking window, and to cap it at that level. So for Crescent Hall, for example, we agreed initially we were going to have a level of 10 visitors being able to book per 15 minutes period during our opening hours, but we found that worked quite well, so we then could increase it during the period of the season that we were open, and we were able to increase that to 15 visitors could book during every 15-minute period. So we were able to expand the number of people that we could accommodate on site, although it was still quite heavily restricted. Linking into that, if I may, I'll move on to section 2, and then I'll pause after I've updated on events and activities from that arena. So under section 2, we did have to, as you would expect, cancel most of our events program for 2020, which is a real shame. But we did look at the focus on digital delivery instead as an alternative means of engaging with people. So one of the key parts of the season, which was really important for us, was to be able to provide, as we were open during October half term last year, we were able to provide a blended offer of physical visits along with self-led activities on site, plus also an online digital presence and engagement from that forum as well. So that was a really good test pilot, really, I suppose, for us for Crescent Hall, but also for how we work across other sites, to be able to offer both a physical visit and for a digital engagement for those people who couldn't get to us on that particular opening window. The theme for October half term was Awesome Autumn. And what that did was it gave people the chance to explore our site at Crescent Hall more closely. So looking at autumn crafts, quiz trails, adventurous woodland games and woodland walks. And there was a really well-received pumpkin obstacle course, which I did view people using, and what was quite enjoyable to watch from a distance. Basically, we had around 140 people coming into site physically on during the weeks of the days of the half-term week, but obviously there were people also engaging online too. The major event days that we weren't able to go ahead with during the reporting period that we're covering today did include, as you would unfortunately expect, Apple Day. So that's it is the most major event that we have, I would say, pretty much across most of the sites in the museum service. It's the real key day for us as a museum service. Of course, we couldn't go ahead with that as a physical offer this year, but we did again provide a different offer, which I'll cover in a moment. And the other activity that we couldn't hold on site, which we love to do normally, was our Victorian family Christmas event, which is normally a 2-day event on site. And again, that was moved online. One of the other things we did also do, even outside of the school holiday periods, when we were able to open at Crescent Hall, was to provide some sort of activity, particularly for children and families, every day whilst we were open. So there was something for people to do themselves, but it was very much a self-led activity again. So it was a pencil-free activity pack for people to use and enjoy. We've mentioned several times already around creating digital resources, and Crescent Hall have set up to the plate, as well as all the other sites that have done the same thing. So there's been lots of new content on the Crescent Hall website. There's been children's crafting activities. We've hosted an online murder mystery, which some of you may have enjoyed, and also we've linked into creativity and well-being activities, which have been inspired by the Lorena Bulwer exhibitions and content that we hold at the sites. So just very briefly, I'd also like to mention around what we did for the 2 key event days we couldn't hold on site. So firstly, on Sunday, the 11th of October, we had our Apple Day Online. That was our first major online foray, really, for the Crescent Hall team, and they stepped up again extremely well. And during that day, there were drop points during the day where different activities were launched. So you had craft activities, Apple recipes, there was a quiz related to apples, and there were posts throughout the day with some video clips as well of staff on site engaging in activities, so people could see what they would have seen when they were actually on site. And again, the Christmas event was moved online on Monday the 21st and Tuesday the 22nd of December. People could log on and enjoy what they saw online. So we had Christmas themed storytelling, craft activities, and there was also a visit from Father Christmas digitally as well, which I think hopefully people would have enjoyed. So I'll just pause at that moment if there are any questions around that first section at all.
Yeah, why was Father Christmas wearing a green cloak?
That's because, Chair, that's the original Victorian and pre-Victorian incarnation of Father Christmas. Okay. It was only the dreaded Coca-Cola brand that changed his outfit, I believe.
Right. Well, you learn something every day.
Can I just add in, Robert? Obviously, if you'd have watched the latest editions of All Creatures Great and Small, you'd have got the Siegfried Farnan saying exactly that.
Right. Well, I haven't been glued to the television all lockdown. Philip.
Surely also that Father Christmas is in this country is slightly European, because the European comes from St. Nicholas, but we had a chap called the Lord of Misrule, who was a person who used to go around, I think from Tudor time, sort of waking up Christmas parties, you know, sort of being the sort of, how can I put it, the, you know, centre of attention at a Christmas party. And that's where perhaps Father Christmas comes, rather than from this, you know, St. Nicholas is European import. And perhaps now with Brexit, we need to go back to Father Christmas and not call him St. Nick. But that's just a, you know.
I would have thought the Norwich Whifflers would be quite good at that as well. Right. Any more questions?
Thank you.
Carry on.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. So moving on to point 3, other museum developments. Just a quick note on our current exhibition or the exhibition for 2020 at Crescent Hall, full steam ahead. This was redesigned after the COVID lockdowns to include safety measures before we reopened, so people could enjoy it. It meant that all touch points and interactives were removed from that particular exhibition, which was a shame, but we engaged with it in a different way, and people still got to enjoy it during their walk through the site. This is due to come out of Crescent Hall at some point in March. Well, we're hoping that's the case, and the new exhibition will be installed, which comes on to point 3.2. So the exhibition for 2021 is called More in Commons, and this is a well-developed theme now. We're getting to the point where we're pretty much ready to start thinking about installation when we're able to. It's in partnership with Norfolk Wildlife Trust, and it's a celebration of wildlife history and the community of Norfolk's common lands. So we've been working with various other groups and colleagues, so natural history colleagues, community groups, volunteers and staff, and we've been developing a very COVID secure but still engaging exhibition. There will also be a community curated and community designed 3D sculpture, which at the moment we have volunteers working on remotely, which will direct people to the main exhibition in our collections gallery. And again, this will not just be a one-touch exhibition. As well as the sculpture, there will also be some elements around the site, including a Robert Kett scarecrow for Cherry Tree Cottage as well. Again, coming back to the online digital offers and blended offers, we've been able to also upload several versions of our previous temporary exhibitions and tours to our website. So they're available to see, and they include things like Full Steam Ahead, this year's exhibition, and some behind the scenes collections tours as well. So this is being uploaded, and we're managing to upload this content at the moment to the Google Arts and Culture platform, which gives it a much wider range in terms of people being able to engage, and it also gives people a real good opportunity to enjoy the physical content that we put into place in previous years. Moving on through section 3, we've also continued to work on the More Than Oliver Twist project, which is led by our curator, Dr. Megan Dennis. We have been given a further grant extension to this particular project because it's also been impacted by the COVID restrictions. So we now have the 31st of March as the final date for the elements of this particular project to be pulled together. One of the key elements that you would have remembered we reported on before was there was due to be a physical exhibition which would have toured around the 6 regional partners in the UK. Obviously, that's now not been possible to do, so that's been changed to an completely online digital offer. And that, again, that particular exhibition is hosted on the Google Arts and Culture platform and is available to view. Just very quickly, that particular exhibition tells the story of 6 of the inmates whose lives were researched during the project. There are audio soundtracks that tell their lives in the form of a radio show, and there's a chance to reflect on their contemporary resonance and to give the researchers who worked on this a chance to explain their experience of how the project progressed. What's also been, as we've said before, another silver lining for the lockdown is we've had a chance for volunteers to take more time remotely to do some research, and we've also included new volunteers in this grouping, and they've been able to complete research on all the inmates recorded in the 1881 and the 1871 censuses so far. So these are all being added to the free publicly available eHive website, and again there was a link in the report to that particular section as well, and they're available for people to look at and to enjoy, and for people to use for research or for family historians to enjoy. Finally, a couple of other elements. The Farmers Foundry Company steam engine project is still again ongoing, but has again been very much impacted by the lockdowns. So we have a new approved timetable for this particular project too, and the plan is still very much to bring the steam engine back to Crescent Hall at some point in hopefully the spring, when we're able to do so, make it fully operational again, and it will also still provide a platform to train a new volunteer base when it's safe to do so. We also responded to the COVID-19 pandemic by introducing a Collecting COVID-19 project. And this has been happening across many sites within the service, but for Crescent Hall particularly, this was led by Megan Dennis, our curator. And it was a phased approach to collecting stories and objects relating to the pandemic. So the initial phase was around collecting thoughts and items and actually physical things from people that they related to within the lockdown. And now we're identifying these stories from a range of people and organisations across Norfolk, rural Norfolk particularly, and we're reflecting upon those, and those will also be added to some of our online content fairly soon. Under 3.7, I'm really pleased to be able to report to the committee that the Adventure Playground at Crescent Hall did finally open in 2020. I was very, very concerned at one point we weren't going to be able to get to the point to open it in time before we closed the site for the winter period, but we did open it on the 25th of October. Just in time for the October half-term week, and I can report that it was extremely well received by our family visitors during that week. So it did have, again, to be delayed slightly as we implemented a very strict COVID-19 safety procedure, a set of procedures and protocols, and they were all signed off again by the Norfolk County Council Health and Safety and Wellbeing Team officers. We again introduced a pre-booked and timed ticket system for the playground, and these were booked at the playground entrance once families had arrived at Crescent Hall using their art ticket pre-booked tickets too. So again, we had to set up a capacity limit for the playground to be utilised. So we had an ability for 25 children to use the play equipment each during a 40-minute play session, and then we were closed for 30 minutes for a cleaning regime within the playground before we opened for another session. And there were 5 of those 40-minute sessions available during the working day, and that seemed to work really well with our visitor base, but kept them safe and kept the children engaged. Moving on to the final parts of section 3, I'd like just to report again on the Crescent Hall farm and how that's going at the moment. So the farm team there have again amended their working patterns to reflect the way that this current lockdown has now impacted, and they are making sure that the daily feeding and care of the livestock is continuing, because it's absolutely critical for us, and they're providing cover every day throughout the week, including weekends. And we have other team members from Crescent Hall also on standby to support that effort if need be. And one nice element for me to be able to report to the committee is that we have been able to continue to operate one part of the of the farm operation, and that is the training of our youngest Suffolk Punch horse, Casper. He's been getting trained very regularly. Every week he's having training sessions at the moment, and his reports of his progress have been very good and very encouraging so far. And if he continues to do well, he will join the team hopefully from the start of the 2022 season and join them in their workload around giving cart rides, ploughing the fields, etc., etc. So that's a good news story that we can continue to provide.
So
moving on. Sorry.
How long overall does it take to train a horse then?
From what I understand from Richard, the farm manager, I believe it probably takes around 18 months to 2 years to get them fully up to speed and operational. And I did speak to Richard on Friday, and he did say there'd been a couple of little hiccups in the last week with the training progress. I think Casper had suddenly thought of a few ways to avoid his training regime, but I think they're working through those at the moment. So
that's like herding.
Yeah, indeed, a very large, very heavy cat. Yes, but apparently Richard's pleased with his progress, so I'm confident that he's on track. Thank you. So finally, we've talked again about the importance of digital, so I won't cover this in this section, but just to highlight to the committee that under 3.9, there are links there to all of our social media accounts for Crescent Hall if you wish to peruse or if you haven't done so already. And we will be looking at digital figures and participation figures at the end of the report. Also, I'd just like to update the committee on the private Facebook group that was set up for Crescent Hall staff, but particularly for Crescent Hall volunteers. And this remains a vital communication tool to that particular group. We have quite a few members of our volunteer group who are falling into vulnerable categories, and some of them are shielding at home and are not actually leaving their house. So this has been an absolute lifeline for them. So regular updates coming from the staff. We've been completing the security checks with some photos of the farm and the animals and the site, and some real good information coming out from the volunteer coordination team to keep them included in what's happening with Crescent Hall and the wider service as well. Content's also being uploaded by volunteers themselves onto that particular Facebook page, so they're all sharing each other's projects. So it's keeping a very vibrant group very much at the forefront of the digital offer from Crescent Hall. Again, I'll just briefly pause at the end of section 3 if there are any questions from anybody.
Not so much a question, but just to say thank you to the Friends of the Museums, because they're an essential part of engaging with the community, and their enthusiasm is to be admired. Yes,
definitely. I echo that. Thank you. So moving on to section 4, which does covers the friends and volunteers. Just to mention under 4.1, it has been a very difficult time for all of us, staff, volunteers, and also friend group members as well. So the Friends of Crescent Hall have not been able to meet on site. It's been very difficult to obviously keep in contact during the lockdown, and it does mean that the second-hand bookshop, which the Friends do run, and it's an income generation opportunity, has not been able to go ahead. Can you all hear me? Because I've just had an internet issue showing my screen.
Yeah, we can. Well, I can.
Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah, all good.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I was actually just going to pause at this point just to ask whether Bill wanted to add anything in terms of the friend.
Bill, please unmute yourself.
Bill, would you like to add anything to the?
Can you hear me okay?
Indeed.
Good, thank you. Only to say that yes.
To report.
Yes, we have found our income has dropped tremendously. Memberships and the bookshop and various other things, which means we haven't been able to meet every single request for funding from Crescent Hall, which is a real shame. I mean, our funding has dropped down to £3,000 anticipated for this year from about 8 and 8.5, so quite considerable.
Yeah, no, thank you, Bill. It's been a difficult time, hasn't it, for trying to get anything moving forward on that front.
Certainly.
Thank you. I'll just continue with section 4, if I may. So second part of section 4 does again just talks around the expansion of the volunteer team, really, and how we shall engage with them online. And as I said to you earlier, we have this this Facebook group, but also there is an email update that goes out to all of our volunteer base on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays every week, which provides a regular link to all of our volunteers to each other and the Crescent Hall team. So it has helped us actually to engage with them and to find remote volunteering opportunities for them to undertake, but also it's seen our volunteer team increase to well over 150 volunteers actively working remotely at the moment, and we've been able to recruit people from across the UK for the first time, which has been an interesting departure for the site. The final thing I'll mention under section 4 is that there is also a weekly virtual Crescent Hall tea break on Zoom, used and again and led by Megan, the curator, and all volunteers and people linked into that can join those particular tea break meetings and just have a chat, have a catch up, but also talk about all things Crescent Hall and all things volunteering.
Excellent.
Thank you. I'll just move on to section 5. Learning and outreach. So my colleague Jan, the learning manager from Crescent Hall, has provided some detail. So just to confirm that obviously it was very disappointing that the return to schools, which we had planned to happen sort of through September and October and getting ready really for the start of November, were impacted again by the fact that we then were sent into a lockdown. So, but we did have, the good encouraging news was we had around 800 children from different schools booked in to visit the site to engage physically on site in school operational events. But it proves there's a strong demand for schools to come to see us and to enjoy our services. So it's a difficult time to not be able to do that, but again, the Crescent Hall learning team, along with all the other learning teams across the service, have adapted the way they work. And I know there's been some questions around this already. But they were able to do very much offer an online service, but we did manage to get a few schools into Crescent Hall before the lockdown really hit hard. So we did have 5 schools in total physically on site, and each of those visits was from a single class group bubble. So I can talk on figures in a short while for you, but there was a small window of opportunity for schools to physically attend Crescent Hall. These school visits all went well, and with the way that the experience of doing that and the way that all the COVID secure regulations and protocols were utilised, we learned very much that it worked safely and well, and the children and the school staff all enjoyed them. So that recent experience can be setting us in good stead for when we can recommence live learning events at site again in the future. But under 5.2, the Crescent Hall learning team also set up some very important online offers for schools. So they completed and piloted 2 sets of films to support classroom learning. Neolithic Britain, the film which was first sent out, follows a light-hearted story around engaging Year 3 students, so 7 and 8 year olds. So it's about exploring the Neolithic period with a character who doesn't think that it was very important. Then there was also a Through the Keyhole series of films to support studies for Victorian Britain, and there was a costume character completing duties in particular different parts of the museum, covering the use of technologies used in the reality of Victorian life in Victorian Norfolk. And the responses from schools to both of those films has been very, very positive from the remote learning. Become an important what happens with schools from Crescent Hall and across the service, as we talked about earlier. And it also allows learning staff to follow up with museum visits after the schools have gone back to their base, and to answer questions that have arisen by the children, and also to consolidate any learning. So again, I'll just pause there if there are any further questions. No, good. So if it's okay, I'll now pass over to Robin again, who will just cover the Kick the Dust update for the service.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I just wanted to provide members with a quick update of where we are as a service with the Kick the Dust project. Just to remind members, this is a project funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. It's one of 12 projects running across the UK, and ours is the only English Kick the Dust project that's led by a museum service. And the project has been running since October 2018, and the focus of the project is working with young people outside of a school setting in the age group 11 to 25, with most of the activity focusing on young people aged 16 and above, with key targets around young people who don't normally engage with the heritage, or young people who are in sort of challenging situations, and essentially, ones that are harder to reach. And as part of the project, we've worked very closely with our key partners, YMCA Norfolk and Creative Collisions, which is a youth-led network based in Great Yarmouth. So it's a project we've sort of reported on previously to this committee, but I thought the committee might welcome sight in the report of the update of participation figures during lockdown. So item 6.2 basically summarizes for you the participation figures from the beginning of the first lockdown in March through to pretty much the end of December. As with all of our events and learning activities, Kick the Dust had to move everything pretty much it was doing online. And it's been really pleasing the way that momentum with this important project has been maintained. And you can see that in 6.2, since the beginning of lockdown in March, there have been something like 1,800 interventions with around 700 individual young people, and they've taken part in about 880 hours of digital activity. And during the lockdown period, we've had 19 Kick the Dust groups continuing to operate, and that would include groups like the Teenage History Club at Setford, and they've taken part during that period in around 370 different types of digital activities. And during the lockdown period, we've worked with 11 YMCA groups, and they've been involved in over 100 activities, and quite a number of those YMCA groups will be YMCA clients who are in YMCA accommodation. So they've been effectively locked down into their YMCA accommodation, and the project team have worked really hard with YMCA partners to provide those young people with a range of heritage activities. And in item 6.3, you can see summarized the total engagement numbers for the project from when it started back in October 2018 through again to the end of December 2020. And you can see there's been nearly 8,000 interventions with approaching 2,500 individual young people. And there's also been 186 volunteering opportunities, which is a really sort of pleasing figure. In our previous meeting, we provided members with information about the Art Fund, the Art Parcel Initiative, where we provided art parcels to young people who were in digital poverty or without ready access to digital resources. So the Kick the Dust project has been recognizing that some young people do struggle to access digital technology because of limited access to devices or broadband, etc. So we've been looking at other ways for those young people to be able to get involved with the project, and that initiative is continuing. What I've also provided in the report is an update of the breakdown of participants in Kick the Dust across the county. So item 6.5, you can see the, and as I mentioned at the start, most of our focus has been on young people aged 16 and above. And in 6.6, you can see the breakdown of audience types. And it gives you a flavour for the range of young people that we have been engaging with. So top of that list, you can see that around 41% of Kick the Dust participants are YMCA clients across the county, with particularly strong working going on in Norwich, Kings Lynn and at Great Yarmouth. And what I've also provided in item 6.9 is just an update for you of the evaluation responses from young people who've been participating in Kick the Dust activity, and compared those with responses nationally for Kick the Dust projects. So the Heritage Fund, who are providing the majority of the funding for Kick the Dust, commissioned evaluation consultants, Renacy, to work with all of the Kick the Dust projects, so 12 across the country, to enable the Heritage Fund to measure the impact of Kick the Dust across the board. So what you've got there are the figures from the Renacy evaluation totals compared with what we're seeing in Norfolk. And in the majority of cases, you'll note that the evaluation responses from Norfolk participants are ahead of the sort of national picture. So that very pleasing, and I won't go through them in detail, but it sort of reflects the fact that, you know, the Kick the Dust project in Norfolk is proving to be very successful at engaging with young people and developing sort of sustainable relationships with young people who now see museums as heritage as being much more relevant and will be looking to participate with that in the long term. There's also been quite a big piece of work going on within the museum service itself as part of a program of institutional change, which has included a lot of staff training and development work to give our staff across the organisation greater confidence at working with young people. Historically, that's tended to sit with our learning teams, so, you know, excellent members of staff like Melissa Hawker. But Kick the Dust is also looking at how a broader range of our staff can develop confidence and skills to work effectively with young people. And a good example of that is a recent initiative called Digital Buddies, where young people have been paired up with individual subject specialist curators to help them develop their digital skills and make their social media and other digital activity more relevant to young people. So we're hoping that in the longer term, you know, a much broader range of NMS staff will be thinking about and involving young people as they begin to plan their activities. And just to conclude, to reassure members that we've also got young people involved in the heart of the Kick the Dust project. So we've got 3 young people sitting on the steering group, and a lot more of our activity now is being shaped and indeed led by young people. And we hope that very much will give us a sort of long-term sustainable relationship with young people, so that this project will have a sort of long-term life. So really encouraging figures so far. And if members wanted a more detailed update on Kick the Dust project at a future point, I'm sure we could arrange for the project coordinator, Christine Marsden, to come along and speak to the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Robin. Yes, I think that would be useful, certainly whilst during the active lifetime of the project, rather than as a summary afterwards. Right. I think have we got any questions from members of the committee for anything that's been raised today?
Chairman, if I may, I've just got the final section to complete for you all on participation figures. Are you happy for me to do that first?
Indeed, yes.
Thank you. So this covers the participation figures for both sites, so for both Ancient House Museum and Crescent Hall Farm and Workhouse. And these figures cover the period of the report that we're delivering to you today, which is October to December last year. I will just give you a brief review of the elements that make up the participation figures so you're aware. So we have physical visitor numbers, we have physical school visits, and of course these will only relate to Crescent Hall for this particular reporting period. We have figures to include for you, and the engagement figures for social media include things like those who interact with our content by liking, by commenting, by sharing, or by visiting our profiles on the back of seeing what they've seen. We also have then remote school live streaming figures, and we have remote youth engagement sessions that have been live led and live explored by young people. So the participation figures totals for each site. For Crescent Hall, the total participation figure at the moment is 16,240 for this particular period, and that's made up by 13,900 engagements through social media channels. We have 1,901 physical visits to site at Crescent Hall. And this was particularly during October and October half term. And the 5 school visits, the school bubbles that I mentioned earlier in the report, that brought in 221 pupils to sites. And then remote school live streaming was delivered to 200 further children. And remote youth engagement activities totaled 16. So that gives you a total for Crescent Hall. For Ancient House, there has unfortunately not been the opportunity to do any physical visits, either for visitors or for school groups or youth engagement groups. So social media figures there are taking the lead. So we have a total for Ancient House of 4,690 participation numbers for this period. And that's made up of 4,482 social media engagements, 160 live stream school participants, and 48 remote youth engagement sessions. That gives you the total for our participation at this stage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I think it's important to record how well the service as a whole has responded to the challenge of delivering a remote service, which is perhaps not where you would expect a museum service to be at home, but I think you've set a lot of standards for future engagement and widened your audiences.
Thank you, Chair. The final thing to mention is we do also have a social media report with more detail for both sites, which I'm happy to forward to Ruth, and it can be an appendix to the minutes if that's acceptable.
That's highly acceptable. Yes, it's normally a piece of paper handed around at meetings, so that's but no, I think you found good ways to measure that engagement, and if it goes out with the minutes, it will reach a wider audience, we hope.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions or points to raise? Philip, as Vice Chairman, have you got anything to raise? No? Okay. Well, thank you all for participating. We've got dates, suggested dates for next meeting somewhere in this agenda.
On that subject, Mr. Chairman, can we make sure it doesn't clash with county meetings? Because today, actually, we're clashing with a county meeting at the moment to one of the scrutiny type committees.
Well, is it a panel meeting or a full meeting?
It's a panel meeting, and
right.
Remembering this is actually a joint committee, not a not just a Breckland one.
Well, Ruth, we've got some. I think you've got some suggested dates there. Can you check with county that those don't clash with any scrutiny panels and the like before we confirm any of those dates?
Yeah. I have already checked that, Chairman, but it's very difficult at the moment because it's transferred to Zoom. A lot of meetings have been changed, but the County Council still haven't published their annual meetings from April onwards yet. So if you prefer, we could just do the first date and then I'll look at the other dates when their meetings are published.
That's highly acceptable as far as I'm concerned.
The 17th of May was the first or the next suggested date. That's Monday, the 17th of May.
Just check my own diary. That's fine as far as I'm concerned. I don't think anyone else has got a clash. So 10 a.m. again?
Yes, please.
Okay. Duly added to the diary. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'll declare the meeting closed.